Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the virtual programming of the Lawrence Family JCC Jacobs Family Campus. Tonight's event is a presentation of the San Diego International Jewish Film Festival. My name is Ryan Isaac. I am the Director of Cultural Arts at the San Diego Center for Jewish Culture. Again, welcome to everyone. People still coming in right now. It's nice to see so many faces here, some smiling faces too, maybe even. There we go. Just want to remind you, as long as we are inside, flattening the curve and keeping healthy and safe, the Lawrence Family JCC will be here to continue to entertain through this programming. You can keep tabs on all of our programming at lfjcc.org/about/virtual. I do want to tip everyone off to an event we have coming up this Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. We have clinical and developmental psychologist Diane Ehrensoft, and she will be speaking to us about parenting during this pandemic, parents for children from toddlers up through adolescence, and also the challenges of working from home while parenting. I'm looking forward to that. I might be the only parent of toddlers who's able to attend that one, so I'll take notes. I do also want to thank our underwriters of the 2019-2020 season for the film festival, for Arts and Ideas. It is through their generosity that we are able to continue to program even during the temporary closure of the building. So thank you again to them. We've all gotten used to Zoom, I think, at this point. Don't forget, though, for those of you who have the video on, we can see you. It's great to see you. Everyone can see you. So make sure you're aware. That's all I ask. Tonight, we are joined by filmmaker Matt Ratner. You may remember the name from this past February's film festival. Matt is the director and producer of Standing Up, Falling Down, the film starring Billy Crystal and Ben Schwartz. Matt is the president of Tilted Windmill Productions. He is a Cleveland native, lives in LA, currently somewhere in Colorado. Matt, I think I saw something on the wall, but you tilted your computer that really kind of gave the Colorado away. There we go.
Let the record show that's cardboard, not taxidermy.
Well, still gives that Colorado flavor. Matt's films won two awards at Heartland, including Best Director, debut for narrative film. Tonight we have Matt with us. Welcome. How is it going out there, Matt? What's going on?
Thanks for having me. I think we're all sort of figuring out this brave new world, but it's been really fun to sort of get to share the film with people and get to talk to people. This is sort of one of the the perks of the business I'm in is it's very rare to get to sort of engage with your consumers and engage with your audience. And thankfully, we did a lot of that in the run up to the release. The film came out in February. And it's been nice to be able to connect with folks, even during these crazy times.
You and I, Matt, spoke last week, and you were telling me that you were about to jump on a call later that day to discuss some of the politics and logistics surrounding a film that's in post-production. I don't want you to give away anything you can't, but these are certainly different times for the industry and for filmmakers like you. What's coming of the current project, and what kind of challenges do you face?
It's interesting. I think we're still in this kind of limbo where it's not just that obviously production's happening, so we really don't know when and how it's going to come back. And we sort of talked about this. There's both the front end, the production, how do you make films in a sort of post-COVID world, and also the back end of how do you consume them. What does it do to a theatrical experience? It's already my background's in theater, so I am a big believer in the power of a communal shared experience. Obviously, I think movie theaters are going to struggle for a while, and so and I think in terms of, people ask me a lot, sort of, how is this going to impact the content we're able to see? And it's going to be delayed because of just the nature of production. I was fortunate. We finished. I produced a film that wrapped in late February, right before the shutdown. Without any pandemic, that film probably wouldn't. We'd be targeting the late summer, early fall festivals. Then it has to be acquired. then it has to be released at a time that makes sense for the distributor and for us, and we think positions the film for success. So a film that shot right before the pandemic wouldn't probably be released under normal circumstances. On the early side, wouldn't be released until mid 21. So it'll be, and obviously Netflix and the places that make their content directly, they have a slightly different mandate, but it's gonna be a while before there's kind of a content vacuum.
It feels like every conversation we have now with filmmakers, artists of any sort, these questions come up, and there's a lot more put on to the business side. For you and being on the producing side, how does that kind of tickle your fancy? Is this more of your wheelhouse to be wrapped up in those conversations, or would you rather be left alone to make films?
I mean, certainly we'd all rather be making movies than talking about making movies. That's kind of what anytime I talk to screenwriters, in a pre-COVID, it's well, there are lots of people who write screenplays that sit in desk drawers. I'm a fan of screenplays that get turned into films. The good news is, for us, a lot of content generation can happen now. Where post-production can mostly happen remotely. And I think the thing that we're all grappling with is, how do you return to a film set, which is inherently a much more difficult place to socially distance than a lot of other businesses? How do you sort of return to a film set in a way that's safe? And I think there's a lot of different answers to it. There's no necessarily one right one. And I think you will certainly see films that are made in a way that reflects an ability to provide a sort of safe space for your crew and your actors.
So you're out of LA right now. Do you feel any disconnect being away from the city, or?
It's funny. I spend a lot of time out of LA anyway. It helps my sanity. And there's ironically, I saw a cartoon the other day that said, I guess all these meetings really could have been emails. And that's very much been true. I mean, and especially often, like Standing Up, Falling Down is a good example where, we shot that film. I'm based in LA. We shot that film in New York. So I was, and if any of you have spent time, 2 hours north of you, how pleasurable it is to get around different neighborhoods in Los Angeles. So 9 times out of 10, if we're supposed to, we're having a meeting with 10 of us who are all in Los Angeles, it's a conference call anyway. So for now, that impact's been pretty minimal.
That's good to hear. Let's talk about Standing Up, Falling Down. It was well received at our film festival, and everybody was excited, packed the house on the Saturday night that we showed it. Working with Billy Crystal, let's start there with the obvious ones. What was it like in terms of pursuing him for the role and then getting him? Can you walk us through what that was all about?
Yeah, and so I'm gonna. You want me to sort of proceed assuming that most folks have seen the film or not? I just don't want to sort of stray into any territory I shouldn't.
I think we can go that people have seen it.
All right, great. So at the end you find out he's an alien and he's come to Earth to take over, and it's that really sort of dramatic thing I think was appealing to him. No, you never imagine that you're going to sort of get someone of Billy's caliber, and it wasn't written for Billy. People always ask that. It was not. It very quickly became tailored for him, but I never give credit to agents, and I'll give credit to agents because as a filmmaker, the last thing you want to do is spend 4 months waiting for Billy Crystal to not read your script, and you just don't have that sort of time to waste. And we'd gotten the feedback from his team that it was the kind of thing he was looking for and might really consider. They got it in front of him quickly, and I was back in New York at that point. We were scouting and got the sort of intel that he wanted to meet. So he got on a plane, flew from New York to LA back in the long ago when we did things like get on airplanes, and I watched When Harry Met Sally. Rewatched When Harry Met Sally on the plane to sort of cram for the meeting. And from the very beginning, Billy's obviously a brilliant comedian. He's such a committed and devoted actor and such a gracious, collaborator. Where obviously there's a little trepidation when you're walking into a meeting with somebody who's hosted the Oscars 9 times. And it was always about the work with him, and it was always about the character and the story. And is this true to Marty? Is this true to the story we're trying to tell? And I think that's one of the ways we got incredibly fortunate was Ben, Billy, myself, the writer, my entire team. We all wanted to make the same version of this film.
Did you have Ben on board before you got Billy?
No, it's the other way around. And we always sort of intended to cast the Marty part first. Not that we thought it would be Billy, but we unfortunately there's a dearth of really quality parts for septuagenarian actors. And so we thought that this was a really fun part that would be attractive, and that we'd be able to cast the Scott role that Ben ends up playing off of that. And I actually didn't meet Ben until 2 days before we started shooting. We'd spent a lot of time on on calls and on Skype and stuff, but he was in Atlanta shooting something. So we, that entire casting process was over the phone.
What was the chemistry like for Ben and Billy, but for the entire crew together once you did meet up?
It's funny. There's a lot of things about independent film that are challenging. The lack of resources sort of all across the board, and that can at times be frustrating. What makes it really special is it means that everybody is involved in a project because they love it and they care about it. And that's true from Billy to the PA. And the chemistry between, if you've seen the film, so much of the movie really is about the chemistry between the two of them. And that's something where if this were a studio movie, we would do endless chemistry reads. We don't have that luxury. So it's sort of, hope this works. And their chemistry was instant and palpable. And, they'd become incredibly close friends in real life. And they'd never met before filming. They met for a day at Billy's office because they were both back in LA. And their friendship sort of off screen and on screen was really reflective of each other. And that was one of those things you just, sometimes you'd rather be lucky than good. And then of course it's surrounding them with other people. I mean, if you get to watch Roger Federer play tennis, but he's playing against me, it's not going to be a lot of fun to watch no matter how good Federer is. So Billy and Ben are actually not on screen together all that much in the film. Their last scene together is the midway point of the movie. So making sure that, people like Eloise Mumford, who plays Becky, Grace Gummer, who plays the sister, Nate Cordray, who's an actor I've wanted to work with for years, who plays, Billy's son and has two really pivotal scenes, making sure that, everybody was coming to play was really important.
You bring up Federer, so I'll push forward with a sports analogy. Often when you hear the sports greats interviewed about personal achievements, more so in the team sports, they'll deflect it and say it's something that they can look back on when they're retired, but now they're focused on tomorrow and the team and the next championship. When you're on set and you've got Billy Crystal in your independent film, did you have those moments with yourself where you're like, wow, this was really happening? Or are you locked in professionally?
Those moments really occurred before. There was one point where the writer, who's become a dear friend since, or texting her like, are we making a Billy Crystal movie? And he's been in so many iconic things, and very quickly it becomes about the work. And that's it just has to, because you're working, film shoot days are really long anyway. And when you're working with we shot this entire movie in 21 days. And we had Billy for 10. And so when you're working with those sorts of limitations and everybody's working, 12, 14, 16-hour days, you just you don't have time to be overwhelmed. The overwhelmed comes before and later.
Nice. I heard Ben Schwartz on the Mark Maron podcast. It's actually back in February. I can remember pulling up into the parking lot of the movie theater where our film festival was taking place, listening to this podcast, and he was Ben didn't spend a lot of time talking about the relationship with Billy, but Ben talked about how he and Billy would have to change because it's an independent film in the car, and the two of them would just hop in the car and strip out of one set of clothes and wardrobe, and then put on the next thing. Those moments, obviously, when people get along, really drive home that kind of chemistry much more than.
To be clear, they never changed in the car together. To be clear,
okay.
No, I mean, it's look, there's just no room for ego on these kinds of movies for the reasons I mentioned. One of the first things I say to any actor, and I said it to Billy, is, I think we create a very good environment and a safe environment for actors to do their best work, but the hummus is going to be from Costco. And if that doesn't work, that's fine. I get it. But, your trailer is going to be as big as everybody else's because there's no trailers. And I never begrudge an actor who doesn't want to work that way. But you got to find out right away. And I think the first thing Billy said to me when I met him was, is this one of those movies where I have to get changed in the car? Because I'll get changed in the car. And as talented a person and a performer as Billy is, if he wasn't sort of down for that style of filmmaking, it never would have worked.
It's a nice little anecdote to it. What kind of, did you have any seminal moments with Billy that are the kinds of things you're to tell grandkids about? Or was it, was the film on its own enough?
I mean, we there are all sorts of little little special moments that I'll keep between he and I, but it's, I mean, I think just there is that surreal element of the fact that you're interacting with somebody whose work you've admired for for your entire life, and you're interacting with him not as a fan but as a colleague. That in and of itself is very special.
So now in terms of bigger picture, and you touched on some of this already, do you think as we start to come out of this COVID pandemic that independent filmmaking is going to gain momentum or grow somehow, or if there'll just be more attention, like is the independence going to be taken out of independent film because there's going to be money not being spent elsewhere?
Well, look, I think if you put $20 in my pocket, I could argue it either way. There are lots of ways in which I think independent film is easier to bring back. We're not blowing things up. We don't need dragons. We're telling basic human stories about people. And so the nature and requirements of our sets and those sorts of things are less. We're used to being more nimble. We're used to having smaller crews. All of that I think makes independent film more vibrant and easier to come back. And then of course the resource limitation, things that you don't, and we touched on this briefly when we talked, silly little things like not being able to just have a buffet lunch, which we certainly will not do, right? Everybody's going to have prepackaged food. That probably raises your food budget 20%, and on a studio movie, that's a rounding error. For us, that's meaningful. I think this isn't news to anybody. It's reliable testing. Because it's very hard to make, for example, a romantic comedy in which your leads have to stay 6 feet apart. It's not really terribly romantic. I think it's reliable testing, and then down the road, obviously vaccine. But I think certainly everyone I talked to in the film business, the safety of your crew, the safety of your performers is, I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. I'm come from a family and a culture of storytellers. I believe in the power of story, but people matter more, and we're certainly not going to shoot anything until we know that we can do it in a way that's safe.
When I get to know your backstory a little more, Matt, and I know now most of your work has been with producer credits, and you're starting to get more involved, or you've had a couple directorial roles. Where's the passion for you, and where did it begin?
It began with my mother taking me to plays at the Cleveland Playhouse when I was 10 years old. My background's in theater. I went to school for theater in Chicago for directing. And that was really always sort of the passion. I kind of fell into the producing, and it was immensely valuable in understanding physical production, understanding, I'm very used to protecting first-time directors. I wasn't used to that first-time director being me, but it meant, I really had a sort of understanding of how to, minutia, how to build a schedule, how to, all of those things to protect the director and enable the director to do hopefully their best work. But yeah, the passion for me has always been in sort of being the key creative voice.
So if you were that 22-year-old coming out of college now, where do you think you'd be going, in just given the fact that there's not much of a job market right now, not a lot of places for graduates to turn? What would your first step be, or maybe your second or third, once you realize what was going on as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, I would have given different advice 6 months ago. The advice I would have given 6 months ago is that every single person I know who and I took a very circuitous path. I spent some time out in being a ski bum. Then I went and worked for in political campaigns for a while. Then I worked at the Justice Department for a while. Thought about going to law school. Didn't. I didn't move out to Los Angeles and start in the film business until I was, I think, 26, 27. That said, every single person I went to school with who wanted to pursue a career in the arts has done so. If they stuck with it for 3-5 years. They're not all doing exactly what they want to be doing, but they're all making a living in the arts. And it's not always been easy, and It's not always been glamorous, but they've all managed to do it. And the reason I left government was because I just decided that, if you have a modicum of work ethic, life's too short to not do what you love. And that I knew that if I didn't at least, like I said, I could try and fail, that's okay. But if I don't at least try, and if you saw the film, a lot of the film deals with regrets, and I come by that honestly. And that was one regret I just didn't want to have.
Excellent. We've gotten a few questions coming through the chat, so I just want to throw it out there to everybody. If you have any questions during the course of this conversation, feel free to use the chat function, and we'll get those to Matt's attention. Some of the other films that you've worked on 5 years ago or so, there was it The Punch and the Clown that got renamed?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Punching Henry is
Punching Henry. What was your involvement in that? Because I'm just curious. Don't really know how deep into that you were.
So yeah, that one's near and dear to my heart. So there's a movie called Punching the Clown, which if you're familiar with Slam Dance, which is it's at the same time as Sundance, and it's for the sort of more kind of the original spirit of Sundance, much grittier, much we made this for a tube of toothpaste and a couple of rubber bands. And that film stars a brilliant comedian named Henry Phillips, and that came out before I was even involved in production. The first film I ever produced was a movie called Match with Patrick Stewart and Matt Lillard and Carly Gugino that I'm very proud of. Through that film, I met two producers who would become sort of long-term collaborators of mine, a guy named David Permit, a guy named Rick Rosenthal. David had gotten involved, had seen, David's one of those amazing guys who's been at it forever, and he just loves movies, and he sees everything, and he's the guy who looks at a grocery list and thinks there's a story in there, and he finds it. And so he'd seen the Slam Dance version and had the idea, connected with the writer director, and had the idea to sort of, that was the version for a tube of toothpaste and 2 rubber bands. On the one we made, we had like 4 rubber bands. So we sort of gussied it up a little bit. Henry's an amazingly brilliant comedian who has, he's probably somebody that you've never heard of, but you've heard of everybody he's friends with, and everybody he's friends with was in the film. So we wound up with a really fun, brilliant cast, and that one was a blast to shoot.
You hit that one on the head. I'd never heard of Henry, and then I started reading down the list from Tig Notaro and J.K. Simons, and Jim Jeffries in there, and Mike Judge. It's an incredible.
Yeah,
seems
Nikki
like
Glazer's in it. Yeah, Al Madrigal.
Sarah Silverman too.
Sarah Silverman.
So were you around any of them to learn from them during that, or?
Yeah. I was. I think that one of the benefits of being a producer is you can learn, and you can watch, and being around people like that. I didn't sort of spend, as a producer, you try and, not get in the way as much as possible. And I think one of the things directors have to remember is it's very easy as a director to get overwhelmed by the fact that everybody needs something, right? Everyone is a very, your cinematographer, your costume designer, your props person, everybody has a very urgent and pressing need that's valid. There is only one thing on a film set that the director is the only person who's allowed to do, and that's talk to the actors. And if anybody else talks to the actors, that's really sort of a faux pas. So making sure as a director that you're focused on that messaging is really important. And then conversely, as a producer, not overstepping those bounds is really important. So certainly more of a fly on the wall with those folks, but it's a good wall to be a fly on.
Yeah, certainly. So here you are in this Colorado, I'm going to say lodge, because I like the wood panel doors behind you. And what's the creative process been like for you while you're out there, and what are you up to?
I've always found nature very palliative, and being able to get out and socially distanced among rivers and trees and that kind of thing is nourishing. The post-production process on the film we just shot is humming along, and like I said, all of that's all in LA, and that's all by and large able to be done remotely. There are certain things like ADR, which is when you go back and you record additional dialogue to dub over. That stuff we're sort of figuring out, but that's all kind of humming along the pace, and reading a lot of scripts and working with writers, and just trying to have a bunch of stuff ready to sort of come out of the gates whenever the gates open.
Nice. What have you been watching?
I just watched the last season of Altered Carbon. We've been doing Middleditch and Schwartz, which I have a certain loyalty to. I've got. It's interesting. I found myself gravitating. I mean, Altered Carbon's a little dystopic, but I don't feel like the heavy stuff right now. I've got enough heavy stuff in the real world. So I've been kind of enjoying, old favorites and just sort of, catching up on stuff. Billions just came back, and that's been a lot of fun.
Nice. Got a question from Stacy. Stacy, you can wave.
Where's Stacy? There you are. Hi, Stacy.
How was it? Stacy wants to know how was it working with Ben? Because Stacy found him particularly hilarious in Parks and Rec.
Yeah, Ben's terrific. And he's another guy who's more known as a comedian, and those instincts are super helpful. He came up through UCB, so he's an incredibly talented improviser. But again, I always felt like had kind of another gear as an actor. And this was really an opportunity for him to flex and get to do things he doesn't always get to do. One of the things he and I talked about early on was that, I know you're excited to work with Billy Crystal, you coming up in comedy, but you're in 107 pages of the script, and the script's 110. So you got a lot of lifting to do. And so things like, his relationship with Becky, the sort of one who got away, and he and Billy both are, they're credited as executive producers, and they aren't vanity credits. They earned them. And they are people who bring so much to a set kind of before action and after cut. And it doesn't matter if you're not good between the slates, but they both, are people I've become incredibly fond of because they're good people. And when you're a 22-year-old PA and it's your first film set and, Ben Schwartz clears your plate at lunch, that makes your year, that matters. And I've always thought that there are plenty of film sets that are really nightmarish film sets and good movies come out of them. And there are plenty of really harmonious film sets that make bad films, but boy, it's better when you can have both. And we're not trying to split the atom. I get that it's important. I get that there's a lot at stake, but you can do it with compassion, and you can do it in a way that's kind. And Billy and Ben both brought that.
Funny and kind, good combo.
And if you haven't watched Middleditch and Schwartz, I'll just so Thomas Middleditch, who's the lead on Silicon Valley, he and Ben did I guess long form improv at the Largo in LA, and they toured when that was the thing. And if you've never seen long form improv, it's wild because it's basically one prompt and then they just go. So they've got a series of them up on Netflix now, and if you need a little escape from reality, they're worse places to go.
I'm going to second that one. I think there are 3 of them up there right now. I've only watched the first, but I've heard a lot about all of them, and it's a nice escape and it's fun. And somehow the 2 of them they have made improv cool. It is commercially cool now, and that's not always the case. Another question, going back to the differences between producing and directing, what lessons did you learn from producing that you brought over to the directing side?
Yeah, I mean, one of them is just surround yourself with a strong team. I needed to make sure that I never took it off fully, but as much as I could during actual production, I could take off that hat and outsource that stuff and trust that it might not get done exactly the way it would have if I was producing, but that it would get done, well, and that only happens if you have a team you trust. And I just think the sort of importance of making sure everyone's making the same movie. I've seen a lot of films where the individual elements are all strong, the script's good, the actors are good, the lighting design's good, but they're all in different movies. And I think as a director, your biggest job is making sure that everybody's telling the same story.
Another question coming through. I think.
Well, I'll buy you some time because the other thing I'll add on the producing directing is there's an anecdote that George R. R. Martin tells about how he started as a screenwriter before he wound up writing all the Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones series. And the reason he sort of left screenwriting and started working as a novelist was he got fed up with producers telling him, George, you can have 1,000-person army or dragons, but you can't have 1,000-person army and dragons. And so he got frustrated with sort of the budgetary limitations of that. And I think the producer in me is able to understand that, like, okay, if it's really important for me to, whatever it is, have it raining during the scene, that's not a choice that you make on a vacuum. There's a piece of equipment that we use for one shot in the film, which is a much more expensive piece of equipment you would normally have on a movie set. I felt like for that shot, for that moment, it was really pivotal to the storytelling, and I was willing to make sacrifices in other areas to enable that.
It seems like everything was pretty smooth on the set of Standing Up, Falling Down between you, the entire cast, especially Ben and Billy. But one of the questions is about when there's struggle to communicate your message and vision. We don't even necessarily need specifics, but I'm guessing that has happened at some point in your career between how you want a scene to happen or the general theme and the feel to be on set between you and the actors. How do you handle those differences?
When you're, sorry, just to be clear, when you're sort of not getting the performance you want,
Correct.
or
Correct.
yeah. So look, a lot of it is knowing actors. I mean, I think if a director gives more than 3 notes to an actor, they might as well give none, because then they're in their head and they're thinking about 12 things, and it just doesn't work. You start to feel it out over time. Sometimes actors are, sometimes actors warm up and they're best on their last take. Sometimes, the first take's what you get and that's it. I've never liked sort of this, especially if you try and do it with somebody like Billy, it's just not going to work, because he's forgotten. He's also a talented director, and he's forgotten more about filmmaking than I'll ever learn. So any actor who's been around knows that if we don't film it, we can't use it. So I think it is kind of I know it's a sort of amorphous answer, but making sure there's that trust, so that when I say to an actor and it's take 5 and it's 3 in the morning, and they say, well, I've done it 6 times, what do you need? I said, trust me, I want this option of whatever it is. I'm all, and then because I come from theater, I think I never like telling actors, oh, can you do it angrier? That's sort of useless. In fact, one of the things I do with every script I get, and this is unusual, if you ever read a screenplay, it'll say often, and this makes it easier to read for agents and financiers because it communicates the tone, but it'll say, full of burning rage, and then it'll say the line or whatever it is. I take all that stuff out, because even if the line is, I can't believe you slept with my sister, I want the actor to have the freedom and the opportunity to make a different choice, because that's where things get really interesting. And that can only happen when there's trust, and when ideally you build a schedule where you can get it, where you can sort of create those moments for serendipity to occur. Now, there are times when it's 3 a.m, you're about to hit OT, and it's like, we just got to go. And if you work with professionals, they get that.
Do you like having the screenwriters on set
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that in general distinguishes, and it's a lazy distinction, but in general, on a film set, the key creative is the director. On a television show, the key creative or showrunner is usually the head writer. And so sometimes, if people are coming from TV to film or vice versa, there can be a little bit of friction there. I've mercifully never had that. I've always been a believer that, good ideas can come from anywhere, and you've got to have enough ego in a positive sense to be able to take them. And particularly with the screenwriter, and particularly with Peter on Standing Up, he was on set every day and was just, an absolutely invaluable asset, because he knew this thing backwards and forwards.
Is that more so than what might happen elsewhere? I've just heard stories where sometimes the screenwriter's not even invited or allowed, and they just turn it over. It's just a transactional exchange where the script is written and check is issued, and that's it.
I have a friend who's a producer, and he became a producer because he was a writer, and he was sick of all his tender, sweet romantic comedies winding up with zombies in them. And it is, if you come from theater, you can't change a word. If you do a play, you're obligated to do the play the way that it was written. That is not the way the film business works. And certainly sometimes, writers are you get this, are marginalized in that way. I don't know if it's the theater DNA for me or not, but Peter's lived with these characters a lot longer than I have, and to not have them as a resource, would be silly.
There's a question that just came up that builds off of what you're saying in terms of creative expression and giving actors the flexibility. Is that more specific or more prone to occur on the set of an independent film versus larger production, or is it just about the people?
I mean, one of the things I think that we got very lucky with, so, some of like the actors who play Ben's parents, Deborah Monk and Kevin Dunn, Deb's won 2 Tonys. You've seen Kevin in Everything Forever. And part of the reason, neither of them have scenes with Billy. Part of the reason they want to come and play for a few days is because and this is, all generalizations are false. This is lazy. But in general, I think you do often have a little bit, it's kind of more about that. Whereas, an episodic thing where if you're on season 12 and it's all right, we're going to shoot it here, here, and here, because that's what we're doing. And that's what we've done for 120 of these. It can be less about, the work that way, which is part of the reason I like the sandbox I'm in.
Great. I just a couple more general questions, a little bigger picture here in terms of experience that you've had at film festivals. And I know we were discussing that last week, and just the energy with being, screening something at a festival, at a big festival, and the positive reaction and the traction that comes with that, that thrill. What's the mindset now, not just for you, but for your peers and friends in the industry, now that festivals have been at least temporarily shut down? Where does an independent film now make it happen and gain traction?
So it is in part places like this. I think it's part of any independent film, and this was true before COVID. The catering budget on a studio movie is bigger than our budget, and that's, with Billy, that's everything. So these films only survive and these films only get out into the world because people watch them, people care, and people tell their friends. And so, it was incredibly sort of heartwarming to go out on this sort of festival circuit with this thing and see the film resonate really deeply with people, and see people, not just, laugh at the funny parts, but really kind of identify with that blend of humor and pathos, really identify with these people and their journey. And then the greatest gift for us as storytellers is having that message passed on. And so it's the same thing that we always needed to happen, which is, we need people, for people to be aware of this thing. We're not going to get it with our massive marketing budget. We're going to get it by people who see the story, respond to it, telling their friends.
That's great. I think it's a pretty good place to wrap things up tonight too. Matt, you're an hour ahead of us, so it's getting closer to bedtime for you. Want to make sure you have time to wind down. Thank you for being with us. I know it was exciting to have your film at our festival, which was just 3 months ago. It feels like years ago. And we hope to get more of your films our way in the future. And thank you. We get a couple of questions actually about where we can find your movies. I know Standing Up is streaming now on Amazon and other.
Yeah, that is my favorite question. So yeah, if you haven't had a chance to see it, or you have friends who'd like to see it, enemies who'd like to see it, it's fine. But Amazon, iTunes, and then sort of any, your on-demand platforms of choice. So any of the Comcast on demand, Xbox, all that stuff. But Amazon and iTunes are the easiest. And yeah, just to sort of close, I know it's sort of easy to feel disconnected in these times. And one of the things that I love about independent film is it is a community. It's a community that cares about each other. And that community includes all of you. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the film. And, please continue to support independent storytelling, because it really, really does matter.
Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Thanks, everybody.
Matt. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.